So this the topic for today is something that appeared on Reddit. The user is Seamus Han 3Y. So I'm going to give him credit for this idea. But it's something that we've talked about. But he created a little visual here, or at least he posted the visual, and of the evolution of George's three conflicts in how the story has kind of gone for Ice and Fire. I'm going to try to be in the corner here, and I want to be able to really get into this and show it. So when we say the three conflicts in George's original outline, there is George very clearly says that there will be three books: A Game of Thrones, A Dance with Dragons, The Winds of Winter, and in that each book will roughly have the outline of the first book being the War of the Five Kings, the second book involving Daenerys' invasion of Westeros, and the third book being the invasion of others. It's not quite like, and so, you know, our author here, our visual author here, not George R. R. Martin, Seamus, put here that visually, and then you can kind of see that over time, George realized that the War of the Five Kings was taking a lot of time, so he then added a second book, A Clash of Kings, expanding that out, and then that became even larger, and so the War of the Five Kings went into A Storm of Swords, but that definitely finished up the War of the Five Kings, and then he was going to have a 5-year gap, if you remember, and began A Dance with Dragons a bit later. And so A Dance with Dragons was going to be the Aegon and Daenerys invasion story, and then the others would be in the final two books when he decided to have 5 or 6 books. And then A Dance with Dragons gets split and into A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons. In the graphic, he puts question marks here, and then which isn't, so I'll go into like this a bit. So the question marks seem to kind of somewhat be, he's like, what is this? Is this really part of the three book plan? It kind of is the 5-year gap. But going back here, if we're going to go for like very small corrections, because this is an excellent graphic actually. So I want to focus on what, it is a really excellent graphic. However, if you're going to go back and be nitpicky, yes, George in his original outline did say Daenerys' invasion. However, from the beginning, in A Game of Thrones, it's very clear that George already had the idea that it wasn't necessarily Aegon, but there would be another Targaryen claimant. That was very clear in the text. In A Game of Thrones, it comes in the form of Jeor Mormont talking about how Aerion Brightflame and his children, and this is like mentioned. And so even though like a lot of people think that Aegon is a Blackfire and the ultimate conflict might be a Blackfire conflict, still George had this idea that there would be 2 Targaryens vying for the throne, and this would happen. Aegon is given baby Aegon is given a face that's not smashed in, so no one can recognize him. All these sorts of things. So it was always going to be a Aegon Daenerys invasion story in the middle, and then the others. And then we kind of go on. This would be Daenerys' invasion, but Aegon as well. This is all very accurate. And then going on with the others, and then this is probably he wanted a 5-year gap, and then he kind of has these books to largely manage the 5-year gap. Keep in mind that when George first envisioned A Dance with Dragons, Dany's flight on Drogon is at the beginning of the story, not at the end, and things like this. So I think it's fair to say that A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons is largely dealing with the 5-year gap and George writing Arms of the Kraken and things like that, and wanting to include it in the story and stuff like that. And then you can kind of see, and this is the important thing here when people say, like, can it fit in 7 books? Yeah, probably not. The story can't, at least not the way George writes. Like, if George went back to Game of Thrones style writing, maybe, and somebody else could probably do it, but not the way George writes. It's kind of he's been writing in an expansive way. And so you do kind of see here that you know, the Winds of Winter would have to involve Aegon, and maybe Daenerys would come in maybe near the end, and they would deal with that conflict. And then how are we dealing with the others? Is it going to cross over with Dany's story? How is it all going to fit? And people kind of look at things and say, well, it can't. There needs to be an 8th book. And that's kind of true. I do think that unless George R. R. Martin significantly changed his writing style, it would be really hard for him to close things off. His other books do have quick endings, so I will grant him that. Like, if you read The Armageddon Rag or Fever Dream or Dying of the Light, they do kind of build and then all of a sudden collapse really fast. Now, what's interesting, though, is one more thing to think about, and one thing that would, like, really improve the graphic and make it even more brilliant, is if you added the seasons of Game of Thrones on this, right? Because Game of Thrones, essentially, if you're looking at this final timeline, seasons 1, 2, 3, and 4 are War of the Five Kings. Seasons 5 and 6 are kind of in this, 5-year gap area, the question mark area. Dany's invasion is season 7, and then the other invasion is season 8, and it happens really, really fast. And everyone thought season 8 was so rushed and everything. So, had he also spliced in at the end here the seasons, it would be pretty interesting to look at that. Anyway, I thought this was a fun little graphic to think about, but it really does show that we just kind of, as fans, we kind of have this pile of problems. Like, obviously, like, George now putting out the Winds of Winter is a huge problem. But even if we got the Winds of Winter, we would still have the Dream of Spring. And everybody kind of goes, well, is that likely? Well, it's really, really difficult. It's really, really difficult on a number of levels. Like, obviously George is getting old, but also just George's writing style is so expansive and it's such a huge story. And how would he deal with this very cluttered ending here that he supposedly planned out years and years ago? So, a lot of people do ask me the question, like, oh, do you think we'll get the Winds of Winter? And I say, there's still a very small chance, but it's not going to be the book you want. It's not going to be the book you want. It's going to be, people are going to read it and be like, oh my God, the story is still getting bigger. And so I say that a bit. I'm like, we may get it, but it's not going to be the book you want. Not to be a downer on things.